Camera's wobbly right now. Okay, I hope that didn't make anyone motion sick. Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Kaylee. It's been a while. It's been a month. It's been a year. I won't spend a lot of time talking about it because I think that there are other people that are doing it better and deserve the platform and the voice to do it. So know that I every day actively work on being an ally, both for people of color, Black lives, and LGBTQ. We are in the middle of June, so it is Pride Month, and as you know, because you live in the world, we are actively basically fighting another civil war to try and get rights for all humans, because it's 2020 and we're still here. So I will have linked down below a bunch of petitions that still need signatures and places that still need donations. But again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because my voice is not the one that needs to be heard right now. So that said, we are going to get into my May wrap up. So again, it's been a while. I am feeling very rusty right now, as well as very tired. I've been up since 3:30 this morning, thanks to the usual BTS. That said, we're mid-June right now, and I'm only just getting to the wrap up. I did take a hiatus because there's a lot obviously going on in the world, and it was a lot, you know, there was a hiatus necessary. So my intention is to kind of rip through the books that I spoke a lot about in my vlogs. I never finished my Asian readathon vlogging the final week because that's when everything kind of went down, and while I read, I just didn't feel right vlogging it. My brain was scattered. There was not much else. There wasn't a lot of reading that happened in the last week of May. So be it. So I'm going to quickly go through the books that I read and the ratings that I gave them, and maybe brief little reasonings behind it, because I read a lot. I read 16 books in the month of May, and 2 of them were DNFs, 2 on top of the 16, so technically 18 books. Let's see. I had 4 3 stars, 6 4 stars, and 6 5 stars, so it was a very good reading month. And I participated in both the Asian Readathon and the mini Contemporary-a-thon, so the vlogs are available at my channel, and you can check them out if you want further in-depth discussion on any of the books that I mentioned. That said, let's get into it. I will go in the order of which I read them. Let's carry on. So the first book I read in May, and I started off with a bang, is If I Had Your Face by Frances Cha. This is a very character-driven story about 4 girls that live in Korea, modern-day Seoul. The various stories and struggles that they go through, both with identity and beauty and the standards expected of women in Korea. They all live in the same apartment building and are interwoven in some way. And I really, really loved it. This is a debut novel, and I am very excited to see what Frances Cha has in store for us in the future. I do feel like the end was a tiny bit lackluster for what the rest of the book built up to, but I really, other than that, I have no complaints, and it's a debut novel, so I always bump up the rating just a tad if I absolutely adored it, and I did. This has a lot of trigger warnings, so I would say check into it on Goodreads for all of the adequately stated ones. It's literally been almost a month and a half since I read it, so it's hard for me to say, but I do know that there's talk of suicide and sexual assault and maybe even rape, so be aware it is not a light book, but it is absolutely good, and it is a stunning little cover. Next, I read The Library of Legends by Janie Chang. This is a historical fantasy novel in which a city in China is being bombed due to a war, and this one group of university students have to travel to safety, but also they are in charge of taking these, like, what are they called? I mean, basically legends. It's like their folklore, and they run into like different gods throughout, but it's very subtle. You don't see a whole lot of fantasy in it. It's just kind of like fantasy light. I found it very interesting, and it did read very fast, but I never really got very invested in any one character or any of the storylines. So while I did enjoy it, it's not something that's going to stick with me for very long. I did give it 4 stars because the writing was good and I liked the storyline and it was unique, but also, again, I just didn't really have a connection to anyone. No one felt very fleshed out. So when things happened, I wasn't really shocked or upset by them or joyful in the good moments. I just kind of felt the same throughout the whole book. So 4 stars, definitely not a bad book. Next, I read a middle grade novel, which is Green Glass House by Kate Milford. buddy read this with Amy, who I'll have linked down below. This was our first buddy read together. I very thoroughly enjoyed it. She also gifted me this book, and then we buddy read it. This is a mystery that takes place all in one inn, and you are reading it from the perspective of the innkeeper's son, who is an adopted boy from China. Was it China? I believe so. In any case, it was very good. I think it was well written, but I also think that it was a little bit longer than it needed to be. It's pretty thick for a middle grade. And I think that the one other thing it struggled with is that there were too many characters for the storyline. I think it could have been reduced by taking away some of the characters that are introduced later in the book that don't really play a pivotal role except to kind of give foundation to a myth/story that is told earlier in the book. And it's just, I don't think it was very necessary. It didn't further the plot. It didn't make it any more convoluted in terms of figuring out what was going on. They were just extra bodies to talk about, in my opinion, and thus I couldn't give it a full 5 stars. I would say it was probably more of a 3.5 for me, and I rounded up to 4 because knowing that middle grade is about more than half of the age of like what I actually am reduced, I always kind of try and think of that when I give a rating to a book that is outside of my reading age zone. So I did give it 4 stars on Goodreads, but it was more of a 3.5 for me personally. Then I got to Princess Jellyfish volumes 6 and later in the month 7, but I'll just lump them together because at this point, so far along in the mangas that I can't really tell you much about it, but I talk a lot about them in my vlog, so I won't really say much about it now. And I've talked about these for like months because I have been reading them slowly over the course of probably the better part of half a year, if not probably longer than that actually. This year has kind of flown by. These are both 5 stars. There have been a couple in the middle, 1 or 2 that I gave 4 stars because they just felt draggy, but we're coming 2 ahead because there's only 8 and 9 left, and 9 is quite short. So things are starting to come together after a very long journey with these characters. I have, spoiler alert, read number 8, which you will hear in my June wrap up, but I still have 9 to go. And I think I'm gonna do that today. So I'm kind of in a reading slump right now, I'm not gonna lie. I've started like 3 different books and I just can't get into anything. So maybe a manga is in order. Next, I read 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami. This is a book that I had intended to read by the end of this year. It was one of my stretch goals. I threw it in randomly. If you watched any of my videos pre-May where I was talking about my possible TBR, I was like, all right, maybe I'll do it, but I would really have to like push myself if I'm going to do it. And here I did it. I didn't even think I'd finish it in the month of May, but I got the audiobook, which helped because I have a lot more time to read audiobooks doing like household chores and stuff than I do reading a physical book. It is very hard for me to read physical books when you have 3 children. Spoiler alert for any of you that want children in the future. Ebooks and audiobooks are the easier way to go. That said, this is my favorite Murakami. I've mentioned a lot in my vlogs about all of the trigger warnings and why maybe Murakami is not for you. It really depends on your reading taste. So be aware that it's not my usual. So if you typically like the books that I like, but you don't really like literary fiction written by men, this is not up your alley. That's kind of the like summary, the TLDR I can give you. But it has officially become my favorite Murakami book. It is about 2 characters and how they relate to one another and then how they come together. This is technically 3 separate books in one bind up, as you can see from the markings here. That said, my first 5-star from Murakami, I think. Kafka on the Shore and The Color Sakura Tazaki might be 4.5, 5 stars for me, but those are books that I want to revisit to really see where I stand on them because I read them a while ago. So yes, 5 star. Then I read The Downstairs Girl by Stacey Lee. I buddy read this with Lacey over at Lacey Lee Bell. I'll have her link down below. This is a YA historical fiction about a girl, a Chinese girl that is living in 1890s Alabama, no, not Alabama, Atlanta. And she's like secretly living behind this printing press, not behind it, below this printing press. I just keep getting slight things wrong while I speak. She starts writing for a column that for the printing press that's kind of like a, what are they called? You know, people write in questions and she answers them and she's anonymous. If there had been more of that within this book, I would have given it higher than the 3 stars, but unfortunately what it was pitched as was not really what it was. And the secondary storyline that was really more about her and her identity and kind of has this like feminist tone to it just wasn't fleshed out enough for me to care and be impacted by it at the end. And I just, by the end of it, it felt all rushed and a lot of this book felt convenient and not unrealistic. And looking back on it, it's probably more of a 2.5 than a 3 star, but we'll give it a 3 star in good faith. I didn't hate it. I think maybe if I read this when I was a teenager, like a younger teenager, I might have enjoyed it more, but it's just not my kind of book. And Lacey felt the same way, so 3-star. Then I listened to Night Theater by Vikram Parulkar. This is a very short book, probably more of like a long novella about a doctor that lives in a like outskirt village of a city in India. Something happened to his practice when he did live in the city and was a very famous surgeon, and now he is working in a village, and this family shows up after closing hours and asks him to help them. They all have these like mortal wounds that are not bleeding. So he realizes that he's in over his head, and he gets pulled into this like crazy story. It ended up being a story more about like morality and what it means to do the right thing and what the right thing is. I really enjoyed it. I thought the narrator was really great. It is on Hoopla, and I do recommend it. I gave it 4 stars, and it's a quick little read. I literally just threw it on my TBR because I was looking to see what Hoopla had that would fit into the Asian readathon, and I stumbled on that and realized that I didn't have enough authors outside of like my Korean, China, Japan semicircle there. So I threw it on there and I was pleasantly surprised. I gave it 4 stars. And then if you recall, halfway through the month, I stumbled upon this conversation about women writing adult fantasy, and Fonda Lee herself tweeted a little blurb about one of her adult fantasy novels that sold me on it, and I bought it, and that's Jade City by Fonda Lee. I ended up reading this with Bethany. She's not a booktuber, so I don't have her link down below. But Bethany and I read this, and then we also started reading Jade War later in the month. But as I've said before, our reading was kind of off, and it carried into June, so I won't be talking about that book yet. But Jade City is now one of my favorite fantasies. One of my favorite adult fantasies. This is a story about a family who wears jade that gives them specific powers. There are different kinds of like power paths that you can strengthen, and most people are very good at one, but not others. But a lot of people can use all the different varieties of powers that jade gives you, but not everyone can wear jade. Some people do get very sick from it, and other people are unaffected wholly. So this family is a clan, and they're in power. They're the No Peak clan. They kind of run the city, so it's a very gangster style story about like jade is kind of considered like a drug in this story. So the like jade trade, the family dynamics within it, and what it all means. I was I just fell in love with the story. I love the characters, I love the family, I love the politics of it, I love how into the world and in depth the world is thought out. I talked about it a lot in my vlogs, so if that's at all interesting to you, go ahead and check it out. If you're here and you've never watched the vlogs before and you've read something like The Poppy War or City of Brass, I think that you would like this as well, and I highly recommend it. This is probably, I'm just looking at my list right now, this was my favorite book of the month. Jade City by Fonda Lee in May. Then I read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This is the Hunger Games prequel. You've probably heard quite a bit about it. I have a lot to say about it, so I didn't vlog about it at all. I read it in 2 or 3 days because I wanted to read it before I started my Jade City reading vlog, or like buddy read. That gave me like 3 days to read this, which was over 500 pages. Like 520 pages. This is a prequel about President Snow, if you have not heard about it. Back when he was a teenager and he's trying to get into college. The Hunger Games have already existed, but like they're trying to make it better, make it more watchable, make people more intrigued to watch it. So back in these days, the students kind of were mentors for the people that got pulled in from the district, and that's basically what it is. It's a story about President Snow and the person that came from District 12 to work under him and all of the things he did to change the Hunger Games as it grew in the future, and the shiesty ways that he lived his life. This story was told in 3 parts. I'm not going to spoil anything that happens, but I will say part 1 is a lot of buildup, part 2 is a Hunger Games, and then part 3 is post that Hunger Games. The Hunger Games itself was a little lackluster, but I was nostalgic and I felt like this was going to be a 4-star book at that point. I will put spoilers down because I do have 2 things I want to say that'll probably be spoilery if you haven't looked into it yet. Part 3 ruined the whole book for me. I gave it a 3-star, which is still pretty generous, I think. And keep in mind that for like 300 to 400 pages, I was like, this book is pretty decent. I am enjoying the writing style. I am enjoying the story. I like that we're not really giving President Snow a hero story before his villainous ways. I like that you can see that he's pretty much a dick and very selfish and only thinks about himself. He's a very narcissistic person, even in his teen years. He doesn't see the consequences of his actions because they benefit him. So, spoilers. One thing that really bothered me in the actual Hunger Games, if you've read it, there's a point in which all of the snakes that if you haven't read this, one of the game makers is like a biologist who creates these creatures. She like crossbreeds things and makes these like crazy wild creatures. Like think of the like dogs or the chimps or whatever that chase Katniss in one of the Hunger Games. Things like that. She makes these snakes, and when they're all like very vibrant colors, when they bite you, their venom changes your blood to that color, and like you start turning into a snake. I don't know, it's painful, you die, whatever. So they drop this whole crate on the people in the Hunger Games. They drop this whole crate of snakes, and everybody scatters, and people die, and everyone else hides, and somehow in the morning they're all gone. Like they have this killer instinct. They smell really well, and if they like or recognize your scent, then cool, you're good. But if they don't recognize your scent, then you're prey. And they just get bored. They just go into the forest and decide to stop hunting. There's like supposed to be dozens of them, and they just all disappear and never to return for the remainder of this Hunger Games. I was like, what happened to all the snakes? It just, that part really took me out of the actual Hunger Games sequence. So that's spoiler number 1. Spoiler number 2, I'm going to talk about why I hated the third part of the book so much. Why was there a love story? Why the fuck was there a love story? Why? With Lucy? Was that her name? I don't even know anymore. Of course it doesn't fucking say. President Snow and whose name I always just skipped over because it's like Coriolanus. I'm not saying that every time I read it, so I just skipped over his name. Everyone ever do that? Because, yeah. And his Hunger Games person, they fall in love, and he, like, leaves to go to her district and be a stormtrooper. That's not what they're called. There. And they have this, like, whole love story. And I was like, not in a million fucking years would someone who was a captive and had to kill other people and be put into society because of people like President Snow, would you fall in love with that person? There's just no. So literally the whole third part of this book was about that, and I don't care about all of the other arguments about why this was so good and what the core meaning of it was. None of it matters because that storyline just didn't make a lick of sense, and it ruined everything for me. All right, we'll move on from this book. 3 stars. That's generous. I knew I shouldn't have gotten it. Like, when will I learn that books that are YA fantasies that like everybody's talking about are just so rarely up my alley? We'll move on to the next book I read, which is also one I didn't vlog about because it is not part of the Asian Readathon, and this was past Mini Contemporary-thon, was it? Oh, it was before Mini Contemporary-thon. This is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. This is my first Lucy Foley book. This is a thriller, and Jamie over at Jamie Reads sent it to me because she got it the month before in Book of the Month, and I didn't. And then the month that I told her I'd get it to read it, they weren't shipping this book specifically. They had like some inventory issues due to COVID, and so she sent me her copy to read it and let her know what I thought. I gave it a 3. It was fun. I thought a lot of stuff was convenient. I thought a lot of the characters' actions just didn't make sense. They were unrealistic. It did remind me of this show. I was telling Jamie about this. It reminded me of this show that happened in probably 2008, 2009, where like this wedding went to an island and suddenly all of the wedding party starts dying one by one, and you spend the whole show every week trying to figure out who's killing everybody off. It's kind of like that here with less murder, but just as much drama. And I was like a little shocked at some of the reveals. So it wasn't a sense of that. It was just that I just didn't buy into a lot of the actions of characters. So it was okay. I didn't love it. It's about all I have to say. It was very dramatic. Very dramatic. Lots of trigger warnings. Lots of trigger warnings. Look it up if you're interested. It has a lot to do with violence and abuse and sexual violence and murder. So, all right, that's it. Then I went through a slew of not having any contemporaries because, okay, 2 of the books on my list to read for Contemporary-thon were literally just these 2. The Knockout Queen by Rupi Thorpe and Untamed by Glennon Doyle. These are the only 2 books that I had on my TBR to finish, and I DNF'd both of them. If you want to hear why I DNF'd them, I would suggest watching my Mini Contemporary-thon vlog. I go in depth as to why I did not like either of these. This could have been good. I thought it was going to be good. It wasn't good. This, I just didn't like the writing style at all. So that said, I had to fill in the gaps, and I just I didn't at the time have any contemporaries that I own. So I like tried to find some random contemporaries, and I found American Housewife by Helen Ellis, which is a collection of short stories that all the like one running theme is that it's about 30 something housewives and like the weird lives they live. It was very like ironic and sarcastic, dry humor. It was okay. There are a couple stories that stand out more than others, and that's always my problem when it comes to story collections, is some are always stronger than others. And then it's really hard to give a fair rating. I did really like two of the stories. They're still in my head now, but I don't really remember much else of it. And I did think that some of the humor was a little bit too on the nose or over the top, so that it was not very good. So I ended up giving it 3 stars. It was okay. Then I listened to Department of Speculation by Jenny Offel. This is a very short book that's basically about a marriage and having a child and what that does to a marriage, especially one that financially is not very secure, and what happens when the marriage starts to fall apart a little bit and an affair happens, and how you get on with life after the affair, especially if you're going to stay together. It was impactful and it was very thought-provoking, and it was told very interestingly, and the main woman that you hear the story through is also a writer, so she's writing her feelings out in her characters. So listening to it, that did get a little confusing because sometimes I couldn't tell if I was hearing a section that she wrote or if this was her true thoughts and feelings about her life and her marriage. So that was a little bit off, and I ended up giving it 4 stars for that reason. Then the next book, I almost DNF'd it, and I talked about it in my mini contemporary-a-thon because the writing style is not for me. So I switched to audiobook and it saved it for me, because I did end up giving it 4.5 stars, and that is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. The writing style is the type where the paragraphs are heckin' long, like real long. These stories are like, the background stories you're getting for moments and whatever are very in-depth. Not always necessary, though it did give a richness to the overall plot. I switched to the audiobook, and I'm glad I did, because it was a very impactful story and it made me think a lot of thoughts about childbirth and adoption and bringing in other people into your life and trusting the process in terms of having kids for other people or adopting kids out. It's a very messy and heart-wrenching book, especially if you have kids. So like there's that extra layer of knowing the like gut-wrenching aspect of being a mother, which is a lot of what the story is about. I did end up finishing the show version of this later, and they did change quite a bit of it, and I truly preferred the book. I know everyone always says that. I really think the show took liberties that kind of wrecked the core of this story. The one thing I did like about the show is that they did make 2 of the characters, Mia and her daughter Pearl, Black women in the show, so we got to add a layer of race and racial injustice and issues into the story that were then explored. That didn't happen in here, because in the story here, Mia and her daughter Pearl are both white women that are in a white neighborhood, whereas the extra layer in the show was a little more fascinating. However, the show just didn't do it right. The actresses are great, amazingly done, like the jobs are great, but this book just hit a little harder with the way it was written and how many secrets there were and the character development. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad I did. I'm glad I didn't give up on it. I'm glad that there was an audiobook available and that I did finish it. Then I listened to a nonfiction audiobook called The Girl with 7 Names, a North Korean defector story by Hyun-So Lee. This is a story of Hyun-So Lee, who left North Korea. She grew up there as a child. She believed in everything that she was told to believe in until she got older and saw that it was all a lie, and she went through a lot of stuff to get out. She ended up going to China with family members, and then she couldn't go back to her mom. It was very, I never cried or anything like that, but it was a very fascinating read to hear what it's like to be indoctrinated into that belief system, and then what it's like to understand and break down everything you've been told your whole life as a lie, and try and figure out what to do and what to go through from there. This is like an offshoot, but I do follow this girl on TikTok who's like, I want to say she's 19. She's very young. She's doing an exchange program in South Korea, and her whole goal while she's there and educating herself is that she wants to help young girls in North Korea escape. And I think that's so fucking cool. What like a thing to know that that's what you want to do with your life at 19. I feel like I at 19 had no fucking clue what I was doing. I was smoking a lot of weed. I was drinking a lot. I was in terrible relationships, and I had no sense of self or purpose. And here 19-year-olds these days are like doing really good shit with their lives. Reading the story made it that much more impactful to know that there are people out there trying their hardest already at age 19 to help those in need in a country where you're basically a prisoner your whole life. So very impactful. I highly recommend it if you like nonfiction and you want to hear the story of someone's life growing up in North Korea. And then last, because the end of the month, as I said, was hard to read, but I still wanted to read. So my gears kind of shifted away from Asian Readathon and then wanted to focus a little bit more on Black authors and Black voices. So I did start an audiobook that I'll talk about next month because I didn't finish it till June. But I also began and finished in a day Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. I swear to God, I own the book. I don't know where it is. So I ended up getting it via like Hoopla or something. I listened to it. I gave it 4 stars. The story is rough because it is about a woman who is married to like a good man and she's not happy with him. Like she just doesn't have happiness with him, even though, you know, he treats her pretty well and she's got a decent life. But she falls in love with a man and then she leaves with him. She leaves her husband for this other guy. And it turns out that, you know, while he did give her a good life, they made money and he was like the mayor of a town, he treated her like shit. She was supposed to just be like his accessory. So her life sucked. And then things happen and more things happen to her. And she kind of comes to terms with everything that goes on in her life. So part of it felt very feminist story and part of it was very sad. I gave it a 4 star. I thought it was very interesting. I thought it ended very strangely. I wasn't really a huge fan of the ending, but overall a good read and I highly recommend it. Again, I have it on Hoopla, so you probably do too. It was an audiobook and I do believe they also have the physical ebook as well. So the ebook as well. But that is it. That's everything I read in the month of May. That was a lot. I know. That said, I have already read 10 books this month in January. In June. It is June 14th. So I'm probably going to break up my next wrap up into 2 parts. We'll see how that goes. Felt weird to film again. That was very long-winded. What else is new? My wrap ups usually are. All right, that is it for me. Let me know how you're doing down below. Like, I genuinely want to know. How are you guys holding up? Let me know what you read in May that you loved the most, what you liked the least. Have you read any of these that you'd like to discuss? Let me know down below. I miss you guys incredibly. It's been another month where I've wondered if maybe I should take a break, like a long-term break from BookTube, but I just like to talk about books. So if you want to talk about books, please do so down below. Like if you like this video, subscribe if you're new here and would like to see more content from me. I post all my social media links down below. You can find me on Twitter, Goodreads, and Instagram. I hope that you're taking care of yourself, that you are fighting for what's right, that you are having tough conversations with people who are on the wrong side of history, and that, I don't know, that you're well. I just hope that you're all well. I'll see you in the next one, guys.